All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to MOS Live. My name is Becca, my pronouns are she and her, and today I'm going to be your moderator, which means that I will be taking any of your questions and handing them over to our live animal care center. Now, you're joining us today for our live animals, Animal Giants, which I'm particularly excited about because one of my very favorite animals to work with at the Museum of Science will be featured today. So don't worry, it'll show up a little later. But if you're joining us on Zoom, and if you need closed captions, you can click on the closed caption button at the bottom of your screen and hit show subtitles. Also, if you're joining us on Zoom and would like to ask questions at any point, you can type them into our Q&A box. If you're joining us on Facebook and YouTube, we are very happy that you're joining us today, but unfortunately, we are not able to see any of your questions or comments at this time. But I am very excited to have you join us along in this video. So with that, I think it's time that I head to the background and instead allow for our first animal to come on screen with our educators.
Hello, everyone. My name is Corey. I'm the invertebrate keeper here at the Museum of Science. And with me today is Liz, who is our assistant curator in our live animal center. So today, like Becca introduced, we are going to be looking at some of our biggest animals, which is super cool, of all different types of species. So the first animal we're going to meet is one of the world's longest insects. And you might already have an idea who it is. So I'm going to have Liz turn on our camera to show our world's longest insect. So this is called a giant stick insect. And these guys are in the family of, again, like I said, the longest stick insects in the entire world. This particular species does not hold the world record, but someone in its same genus does. So these giant stick insects are from Malaysia and Singapore. So that's kind of like Southeast Asia area. These guys are herbivores, so they eat plant material. As you can see, they do a really good job of blending in with their environment. So they want to look like a stick, and they are really, really good at it. So I'm going to have Liz show you guys where the head of our animal is because it's a little hard to tell. So when you are looking at this animal, there are two long legs all the way up. Follow those back until you see there's like a little bump. That is its head. So you can kind of see the eyes and the antenna are pretty short compared to other insects and go up along the legs. Then we'll follow the body down. We see our nice 6 legs, so 3 pairs, all the way to the very end of the body where we see the end of the abdomen. So you may be thinking, I have never seen an insect this large. And there's a reason for that. So in our area, we live in a temperate climate. So our insects here in Massachusetts tend to be a little bit smaller, where this animal comes from a very tropical location. So in tropical location, insects are able to get a lot larger because they're able to be in their adult stages for a longer period. Our insects here have to go in overwinter in some form. These guys don't have to do that, and they can reproduce year round. Now, one of my favorite things about giant stick insects is that these guys are parthenogenic. And that's a huge word. And that means that these animals do not need males to reproduce. So this female can make an egg. These guys don't lay eggs, they really fling them. It's quite funny to watch. They fling their eggs, but that egg is just a genetic copy of themselves. So these guys do not need males to reproduce. Males are important though, because it brings new genetics into the mix, which is really important for a lot of animals. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over and see if we have any questions about our giant stick insect.
We do. And I think you mentioned it, but if you wouldn't mind saying again, where do these insects live?
Yeah,
Maybe also at the museum.
Oh, yes, exactly. So these guys are from Southeast Asia. So Malaysia and Singapore is where you can find them in the wild. Here at the museum, these guys actually live in our insect zoo, in our garden walk-in insect zoo. This individual, so this is a female, and the females are a lot bigger than the males. Currently, unfortunately, our 2 males did hit the end of their life span, and they did pass away recently. So this female lives in our back room, while on exhibit, we currently have 4 adults. And let me tell you, when they're in their tank with all of their sticks and all of their decor, it's really hard to find them. So it's a really fun game to come to the museum and see if you can find all the stick insects that are in their enclosure.
All right, and let's see, we have a few more questions. Leah and Ella are wondering, what is this one's name?
That's a great question. So we don't tend to name our stick insects here at the museum just because we usually have so many and because they all look very, very similar. We do have one individual, and she is actually brown, while the rest of them are green. And it's totally just genetics. We're able to tell who her offspring are because they're also brown. But this one does not have a name. If you would like to go ahead and name this one, feel free to throw some name suggestions in the comments. I love to hear the name suggestions.
I'm sure we'll get plenty of those. We have quite a few people actually wondering, why isn't it moving? Is it slow? How does it look so much like a stick?
Oh my goodness, this animal is wild. So this is their main defense mechanism. Like I said, these guys are herbivores and they really have no way to protect themselves except to blend in and camouflage. So we can see that camouflage with their green coloring, but also with the fact that they look just like a stick. So in the wild, you would not see a stick getting up and moving or walking around. So that's what these guys try to do. Is they want to stand very, very still. Becca, there were a couple of questions you asked in there. I think the other one was, why is it green? And that is to blend in. And you might have to remind me of the other ones that you threw out there.
I think you pretty much covered it. There was, why is it slow? Why isn't it moving? Why does it look like a stick?
You reminded me though, I did want to touch on, so these guys are super weird. So they don't move very quickly. And as you could imagine, having such long limbs, it can be pretty awkward to move sometimes. So these guys, if they feel really threatened or scared, their first defense is they will actually fling their eggs at you. I know it doesn't really seem like a great parenting strategy, but that can be really startling. So they fling their eggs. If that does not scare off their predator, or if their predator goes to touch them, they do this thing. I call it noodling. I don't know if there's a scientific term for it, but these guys literally shoot all of their limbs up and they fall straight to the ground and kind of turn into this wiggly noodle. It's very difficult, especially when I'm trying to move them and they do that. So I have to be very, very careful when I'm moving them, because if they go to do that, another defense mechanism is they will lose a leg. So these guys can still move around with only 4 legs. Once it gets to 3, it gets a little harder. So these guys, they are okay as adults getting rid of those legs. So I have to be very careful in moving with them, because again, they'll put all their legs up and it's easy for one of them to just pop right off.
Very interesting. Now, I will mention we've gotten quite a few suggestions for names, including quite a few saying Sticky as a name, which I think is cute.
That's adorable.
But also Paolo, Villain, and Rick the Stick. Sir Sticks a lot. There's a lot of great names out there.
Oh my gosh, these are amazing.
Oops, I almost muted myself. All right, so we have a lot of questions still. So people are wondering, I think you mentioned that this is a girl, is that correct?
It is. So this is a female stick insect. And one of the big differences, like I said before, is the size. The males are a lot smaller. They're thinner and they're shorter. But another good indication is the males also have wings where the female does not.
Awesome. And how old is she and how old can they get to be?
That's a wonderful question. So these guys, once they're adults, they live for about 6 to 8 months. This individual is just about 4 months. What's interesting is having these guys in captivity, they outlive their time so much more than they would in the wild. As these stick insects start to get older, it's harder for them to move around. Their bodies are just ready to start deteriorating. And normally that's when a predator would come along and eat these guys. Here, they don't have predators. So these guys actually really outlive their natural lifespan. which does make it hard. We do end up having to sometimes make the decision to euthanize because an animal is just so old that its life is not a good quality. And it is a very hard decision, but it does show what great care that we provide here, that they're able to live so much longer than their natural lifespan.
So I believe you must have mentioned something about wings. I personally missed it, but we have questions. Why does this female not have wings, and can they fly with their wings when they do?
Great question. So the females just have evolved to not need wings, and there's a couple reasons for that. And this is pretty common in stick insects that the females will not have wings, but the males will. And that's a life strategy. So since the female's putting so much energy into making eggs, she doesn't need to fly to find a mate. Where the male stick insects, they actually will fly to find a mate. With this specific species, the males, their wings are so small that they really can't fly. Might help them glide to the ground a little bit easier, but as they evolved, those wings have gotten smaller and smaller, and you really don't hardly ever see them flying. It wouldn't pick them up like a bird. You wouldn't see them flying like a bird or another insect. That's a great question.
All right, I think maybe we have time for just one more question before moving on to our next animal. A lot of people have asked, what do they eat?
Great question. So these guys are herbivores, so that means they eat plant material. Here at the museum, these guys eat bramble, which is a type of blackberry bush. In Singapore and Malaysia, they're going to be eating other types of native plants that are there, being a little more specific to what they eat, but these guys are strictly plant eaters.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much, Corey, for sharing that information. I'm going to share my screen in case there's a little bit more information that you can get from my slide here. So feel free to take a picture of this. Unfortunately, we couldn't get to every single question. So I do hope that this answers a few questions as we will wait for our next animal to come on screen.
I think we are ready whenever you are.
All righty, I'm going to stop my share and we will move on.
All right, so we met a giant insect. Next, I wanted to introduce you to a giant amphibian. So some of you may have an idea of what this animal could be. It is a frog. Now, I'm guessing probably many of you have never seen a frog quite this large. It is a giant frog, hence the theme of our show. Now, more specifically, this frog is called an African bullfrog. So you've probably heard of bullfrogs before. We do have a species of bullfrog native to this area called American bullfrogs. Now, African bullfrogs are the second largest species of frog in the world. That probably isn't very surprising because this is a pretty large animal. The largest frog in the world is one also native to Africa called the Goliath frog, very appropriately named. Goliath frogs get as large as dinner plates. Our African bullfrog is probably more the size of a salad plate, I would say. They can weigh up to 3 pounds, so they are certainly good-sized frog. And Corey is showing you kind of size comparison right now with her hand. So they are extremely large frogs. Now, African bullfrogs in the wild do live in sub-Saharan Africa, and they actually have wet and dry seasons in their native habitat. A lot of you probably know that amphibians don't really do well in dry environments. You'll notice this frog is very wet. Their skin needs to be kept moist to avoid drying out. So African bullfrogs are pretty cool. In order to survive this dry season, they actually burrow. So they will use their back legs to work their way down and dig down into the soil. They could stay underground for several months to kind of help survive that dry season. Then when it's the rainy season, they will come up more to the surface and do most of their hunting and eating at that time. In addition, they actually can secrete a waxy coating on top of their bodies, and that helps seal moisture in and helps them survive that dry season. Now let's talk a little bit about the hunting style of African bullfrogs. Now, African bullfrogs are the ultimate ambush predator. You might say they are nature's couch potatoes. Now, those of you that have ever seen American bullfrogs, the ones that we have here in New England, you'll notice they're really great at jumping. They can do really far leaps. They're very, very fast moving. African bullfrogs are a little bulky, a little chubby. They're really not great at jumping. They're really not great at leaping. They're really great at sitting. You'll notice he's doing a lot of sitting in this enclosure right now. Oh, he's trying to prove me wrong by giving a little wiggle right now. But they are very good at sitting. They pretty much sit in that water hole, that muddy water hole, and they wait for dinner to come to them. So what would be dinner for an African bullfrog? Large insect comes down to the water. It's not paying attention. The bullfrog will eat it. Let's say a mammal, something the size of a mouse even, comes down to the water to get a drink. It's not paying attention. The bullfrog will eat the mouse. Let's say a bird even, about the size of a sparrow, comes down to the water. It's not paying attention. The bullfrog will eat the bird. And if all those options haven't worked, the bullfrog will turn and eat the bullfrog sitting next to it. They are not above being cannibals and are known to even eat their own species. So they are nature's couch potatoes and they are very good predators. Now I see we have a ton of questions, Becca, so why don't I turn to some of those quickly?
We do, and I don't think I'll be able to get to every single one, so I'll apologize in advance. But as you were just mentioning that they eat a lot of different things, we had a really great question that came in. How much food does it eat compared to its size?
So pretty much anything they can fit into their mouths, they will eat. And I don't know if you can see completely how far back their jaws hinge, but it's actually pretty far back. So they do have a really wide mouth. In addition, they have a form of frog teeth that are known as denticles, very sharp, pointy projections. So if this frog did bite one of us, it would hurt and it would draw blood. So pretty much anything they can cram into their mouths, they're going to try to eat. With that being said, the diet of this specific frog, I can tell you about that one since I feed him here at the museum and I know what he gets. He actually eats large crickets 3 times a week. So he eats crickets that are probably about close to an inch in length. And in one feeding, he might eat 8 of those. So he eats that 3 times a week. Occasionally, we do give him dead small mice to kind of supplement that diet. Amphibians are ectothermic, so they don't need to eat quite as often as things like mammals and birds. So it's hard to say exactly how much one in the wild would eat, but they would be able to go for a while without eating.
All right, and we've had a lot of people, including Kenya, ask, what is this frog's name?
His name is Meatloaf, and he is 13 years old. They are known to live 25 years in captivity, so they can be pretty long-lived animals.
Awesome, and you answered a lot of questions about the age and whether it was a boy or a girl, too,
Great.
with that.
Those always come up.
Okay, so here's an interesting question. Etienne in 4th grade is wondering, why is he or she so big?
That's a great question. And I don't know that I have a great answer for you. It might be kind of similar to what Corey was describing with the stick insect, just its habitat enables it to get a lot larger than ones that we have in this area. So it might be similar to that. Maybe in sub-Saharan Africa, it's a little bit easier for some of these amphibians to get larger, but that's honestly a good question that I might have to look more into. I don't know if I have a perfect answer for you.
All right. And we also are wondering what might eat a giant bullfrog like this.
So when they're babies, a lot of you probably know what baby amphibians look like. They are tadpoles. They are certainly vulnerable. A mother bullfrog lays thousands of eggs with the hope that just some of those will hopefully make it to adulthood. So pretty much you name it, it will eat a tadpole of an African bullfrog. Once they get really big like this, it would take a pretty voracious predator. Maybe a wild cat would be able to get them, but they're pretty big, they're pretty sturdy. So they're definitely a lot more vulnerable when they're babies, when they're those tadpoles.
Awesome. And we are running out of time. We still have one more animal, so I think we have time for just one more question. And there are so many great ones. I think maybe to finish off, let's think about does this frog hibernate in winter? And maybe do other frogs hibernate in winter too?
Yes, a lot of frogs will have to do their version of hibernation to survive cold climates. A lot of our New England frogs are actually pretty tolerant to freezing. A lot of their bodies can actually freeze. And then in the spring, they will thaw out. I know it seems crazy, but a lot of them will do that to survive. And then the African bullfrog, it's not so much winter it needs to survive, it's that dry season. So they will burrow way down below in the mud, and that's how they will survive that dry season.
Awesome. And I believe that we will need to start getting ready for the second animal. So I'm going to go back to, or the third animal. We're already on the third animal. I'm going to go back to my slides and show you some more information about the African bullfrog, because we do have a lot of unanswered questions, and I'm sorry about that, but hopefully this might answer a few of those questions. And feel free to take a picture of this screen here, and maybe that will get some of your information for the African bullfrog here.
All right, and I think we are ready. So we had a large insect, a large amphibian. Finally, we're going to finish with a large reptile.
Which is my favorite.
We actually took this reptile out for a show several months ago, and he was kind of a wiggly brat for Corey. So let's hope he is on his best behavior today. Whenever Corey is ready, we're going to pull him up on the camera. He is definitely worth the wait.
Oh,
all right. So our large reptile, or giant reptile, as the theme goes, is a Central American boa constrictor. I'm guessing probably most of you have heard of boas before. Now, there's actually a lot of different species of boas. It's a family of snakes. Now, Central American boas are actually considered kind of moderate-sized boas. They typically get about 7 or 8 feet in length. They can get upwards of 9 or 10 feet. The more average is about 8 feet in length. There are other boas that get a little bit larger than that. Although, would you believe me if I told you that boas are one of the smaller of the giant snakes still in existence these days? They are, in fact, some of the smaller ones. If you're thinking of the really big giant snakes, chances are you're probably thinking of a python. Things like Burmese pythons, rock pythons, they're known to get upwards of 20 feet in length. The reticulated python, which is the longest snake in the world, can get over 30 feet in length. To give you a comparison, that is the length of a school bus. Picture a snake stretched out as long as a school bus. Those are your snake giants. Now, whenever I say the longest snake, and I mention reticulated python, everyone always wonders, but what about anacondas? I thought anacondas were the biggest snakes. Green anacondas are usually slightly shorter than reticulated pythons, but they are the heaviest snake in the world. They easily could weigh double what a reticulated python weighs and be upwards of 500 to 550 pounds. That is a giant snake. So they kind of have to share the title of being the biggest snake. Now, I've mentioned the living giants in the snake world. None of these even come close to the largest snake that ever lived. That was called Titanoboa. Very appropriately named, if you ask me. Now, Titanoboa could get upwards of 42, 45 feet in length and weigh over 1 ton, weigh over 2,000 pounds. So that is an extremely giant snake that is no longer alive today. Now, a lot of times people are afraid of snakes. So what I always like to point out, snakes aren't going after people. They don't want to hurt you. Snakes are pretty shy and pretty elusive, even the really big ones. So they don't want to hurt you. They want to be left alone. Now, with that being said, if you approach a snake in your backyard and you grab it, chances are it's going to bite to defend itself because you're a bigger animal. It would be scared of you. But snakes aren't necessarily going after people. If you leave them alone and appreciate them from a distance, they are more than happy to leave you alone. Now, I see we have so many questions, Becca, so why don't I try to get to those in our last few minutes?
We do. Lots and lots of questions. Many people are asking the classic question, including Tegan in grade 3. What is this guy's name?
His name is Belize. That is one of the countries where you will find them native in the wild.
Awesome. And we also are wondering how long is this specific python? Or sorry, boa. I should know that.
That's a good question. Snakes are not that easy to measure. They don't often like to stay in a perfect straight line so you can hold, a ruler up to them. He is probably somewhere between 7 and 8 feet in length, which is pretty average for this particular species. And he probably weighs somewhere between 10 and 12 pounds. Sorry, I don't have more accurate recent assessment of him.
I would also say more like 12 pounds, maybe. He's heavy. We're also wondering, how old is he?
He is about 14 years old. That might seem pretty old, but boas are known to be pretty long-lived snakes. They easily can go 20 to 25 years. Our last boa that we had here at the museum lived to be 28 years old.
Awesome. And we're also wondering, from Jack in grade 3, is it venomous?
This is a non-venomous snake. They are constrictors. So they do squeeze their prey in order to kill. So it is definitely a non-venomous snake.
Awesome. And we are wondering, why does it have this pattern on it?
I personally think the pattern is quite beautiful, but actually would help the animal camouflage in its native habitat. These are snakes that you will mostly find on the ground in kind of dead leaf litter. So if you picture leaves when they're up in the trees are mostly green, once they fall down to the ground and the leaves die, they usually turn brown. So this snake would blend in very, very well on that forest floor amongst those dead leaves. So even though the pattern, again, I think is quite pretty, it would give a lot of camouflage. Camouflage is important if you're prey and you don't want an animal to find you, and if you're a predator and you don't want other animals to know you are there. Especially with this snake, it's a pretty big animal, so you want to stay hidden as best you can.
So we have a lot of questions about what do they eat, maybe in the wild and here at the museum.
It's actually quite similar. They are carnivores, so snakes always have to hunt, always have to eat meat. In the wild, they're probably going to eat a lot of large rodents that they're able to find. Here at the museum, he does eat rats. We do feed him rats that are already dead, but he does eat rats here at the museum. Might be a little more varied in the wild, maybe if they're able to get a lizard, a bird, but probably a lot of small mammals like rodents.
Awesome. And we have so many questions, but only a little bit of time. So maybe just 2 quick questions until we are completely out of time. We are wondering what might eat a boa constrictor?
So a full size or close to full size boa like this one, technically they grow a little bit throughout their entire lifetimes, but he's pretty much at full size. Really wouldn't have too many predators to worry about. They are probably what is known as an apex or top predator at full size. Definitely a baby boa constrictor would be a little more vulnerable. When they first are born, they're only about 12 inches long. So that's pretty tiny, about a foot long. So pretty much anything that's able to get it, a large predatory cat, fox, something like that would definitely go after a baby boa. But once they get full size, they don't have too much to worry about.
All right. And I think the last question we're going to ask is, how do they move? They don't have legs.
That's a really good question. a lot of their movement is actually based on their underside scales. So you're actually seeing a lot of that movement right now. First, let me explain that snakes do have lots and lots of bones. A lot of times people forget that. And they're also very muscular. These scales on the underside that Corey's showing you right now are really wide, and they kind of work like a tire tread. So they can kind of push against a surface using those scales. Of course, now that I'm talking about it, he's finally staying still, but they can really push against a surface, especially a smooth surface, to help themselves get moving.
Awesome. And I know I could stare at him all day. He's one of my very, very favorite animals that we have, but unfortunately we are completely out of time. So I want to thank all of our animals and Corey and Liz. You guys can do your wave goodbye. Thank you. And I'm going to share my screen one more time because there are a lot of questions and I couldn't get to all of them. So I do apologize, but hopefully these slides allow you to get a little bit more information. So again, take a picture of our friend Belize here in his finest. Unfortunately, like I said, we had over 160 unanswered questions. You guys had so many amazing questions for me. So thank you for that. If you would like to join us for any other programs in the future, we would love to have you come back and join us. Just check out mos.org/MOS at home for a full list of virtual offerings and come back, see more animals, ask all the questions that you have. And if you enjoyed this program and are able and would like to support the museum in programs like this, you can head to engage.mos.org/welcome. Once again, thank you all very much for being here and for your excellent questions and observations. Have a great day.